this, and I have editing software so I can edit out anything if I need to.
Like if I get attacked by a bear or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. That might be kind of entertaining. I might want to keep that.
Yeah, actually it would. You get a lot of hits on that.
Well, I have, well, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I know you are a very busy man and you're getting up to maybe taking a break sometime soon for yourself and Irene.
Well, why don't you save that for the interview? We'll talk about it. Or
Well,
are you already taping it?
oh, I am, but I can edit this out.
Okay, no. I was just telling you. So anyway, so Irene has some health problems, and she wanted me to kind of ease up on the frequency of interviews because she has a lot to do with the back end, all the administrative stuff. So I've just been doing 2 a month, but I've gotten involved in other projects which are keeping me very busy, which we can talk about.
Yes,
Related
I
to
would
all
love
this.
to. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so there's this guy named Nipun Mehta who has an organization called Service Space, which is really quite a significant thing around the world. So many people involved in it, and so they've got many projects going on. He's been on Batgap, but anyway, about a month ago, a little more, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're doing stuff with AI, and how would you like a AI chatbot for Batgap?" And I've been thinking about learning more about that and getting on the curve, the bandwagon. And so I said, yeah. So in the past month or so, we've created this chatbot on Batgap, and I've uploaded transcripts of all the interviews. I'm in the process of uploading. In fact, you responded to an email I sent out about it.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of uploading transcripts of all the YouTube videos of all the guests who have been on Batgap, which I worked out a whole system of creating and doing. And if people send me their books and other things, great. And then we've expanded it out so if people have enough material themselves, they could have their own chatbot, and they're all set up as a kind of a web, so that if anyone wishes to share their data, then anyone who wishes to include it in their chatbot or data corpus, as it's called, may do so. So Batgap is eclectic; it's many faceted, and so I'm including lots of different people's data in my own, but then others would like to limit it just to their own because they may have written a couple thousand blog posts or books and this and that, and they want it to be a thing where people can interact with their voice, with their knowledge. And so that's an option. Anyway.
Yeah, so that's going to be a great opportunity because, like you said, it'll be like a web and connecting everybody, and what a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, and just to give a better understanding of how it works, so let's say that you were interested in astronomy and you read every book and saw every documentary and everything else about astronomy. So you'd be well versed in astronomy. And then if someone started asking you questions about it, you would have all that knowledge and you could just carry on a very intelligent conversation with them. Not remember specifically, what was in this book or that book, unless you're Rain Man and you had a photographic memory. But you could draw upon all that knowledge and give coherent answers. So that's kind of the way this works. It just sort of draws upon all the data you put into it and carries on a very human-like conversation with you in response to questions based upon the totality of all the knowledge or information that you have fed into the data corpus, which in my case is everything I can get my hands on from the people I've interviewed, and then also some other stuff related to that. So it's kind of cool, and I've seen some people engage in very interesting philosophical debates with it and have a fascinating back and forth. And I have a feeling that this is just really, it's like this is 1995 in terms of the internet.
Yeah.
And where this will be a few years down the line is going to be amazing, but I'm kind of building the foundation for it in terms of my own usage.
Yeah. No, I understand and get the whole process of it. It's going to be so there's a positive side to AI.
Oh yeah, I mean, you hear these scary stories in the news, and it's like the internet itself. I mean, bad people have done bad things with it. Good people have done good things. And if the good people just say, "Ooh, that's scary," I heard some scary news stories. I don't want anything to do with it. Then the bad people are just going to go ahead and do their thing anyway. So, there's promise for all kinds of interesting innovations in medicine, computer technology, and climate change, and all kinds of issues. It can help in ways that would be very hard to do otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, even in terms of like the Human Genome Project. I don't know if this involved AI or some other computer technology, but it used to be that it would take like thousands of hours, days, maybe 5 years for to work out a single gene sequence in the human genome, with PhD students working on it. Now they've worked them all out. There's hundreds of thousands of them. And, the computers just were able to do it quickly and easily. And so I posted something on Facebook the other day. Somebody sent me this picture of a 5 megabyte hard drive in 1956. And it was this huge thing that about 10 guys were loading onto a truck. It was this giant heavy thing, which probably cost millions of dollars. And then next to it, it had a picture of a 1 terabyte chip these days on the tip of somebody's finger. Now, a 1 terabyte chip has 200,000 times the capacity of a 5 megabyte hard drive. And, you can get those things for pennies, literally. Not literally, but figuratively, very cheap these days. So that's the way computer technology has evolved. And it only seems to be accelerating.
Yeah.
And with AI, we're going to see something similar.
Yeah. I can kind of fast forward into the future and imagine where this could possibly go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not paranoid to worry about negative places it could go. And there need to be guardrails and precautions. But it can be put to a lot of good use. So we just have to sort of focus on that and do it. We're not going to make it disappear. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. The knowledge is there. I have to channel it to good purposes. I'm climbing a hill, so I'm getting puffy and puffy.
How many miles do you walk every day or just about every day?
About 5.
Wow.
And I've been doing this pretty much ever since the pandemic started. So over 5,000 miles since that.
Wow.
And because of my wife's health condition, I don't go out in public really. I used to be playing a lot of pickleball before the pandemic, which is a really fun sport. But I've just kind of focused. I've just dropped that and been doing this. I get a lot accomplished walking in these woods, like talking to you.
Yeah. I do understand. I have a family member with a health issue, and I stay isolated because of that, because I want to stay in contact with them.
Yeah, in her case, it's a lung thing, so have to be real careful not to pick up any cold or flu or COVID or anything.
Yes. Yeah. So, are you ready to dig into my list of questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Fire away.
I hope this isn't, repetitive and boring to you. So
I don't get bored easily.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
In fact, I never get bored.
You know what? I don't
What?
either. And that's a hard thing to explain to people, but how is it possible to be bored in this world? I don't.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of inner contentment and there's a lot of fascination with life itself, and never a dull moment.
No. Okay, so I'm going to, and if it gets boring and repetitive and you want to take it in a different direction, feel free to do so because I can
Sure.
dialogue on just about anything.
No worries, mate. As the Australians would
So,
say.
first question, and this is, we'll end up possibly um, opinions, but given your long history and your wisdom on the topic of spirituality, um, I look towards you, and I know a lot of other people do too, as somebody who has a wide range of understanding in the field of spirituality. And that's only one area. So, my first question is, how do you define spirituality?
All right, off the cuff. I believe that divine consciousness and divine intelligence, is all pervading. And in fact, if you go deep enough, it's all that is. And, we're all impulses or expressions of that. Not only we, but plants, trees, dogs, rocks, everything. And so, the whole universe is that divine consciousness or intelligence interacting with itself and giving rise to more and more complex forms. Started out with hydrogen, and as Brian Swim, whom I've interviewed, says, you leave hydrogen alone for 13.7 billion years and you end up with giraffes, rose bushes, and opera. So this divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it, I use the word divine to imply that it's not just sort of plain vanilla consciousness without any sort of intelligence and omniscience to it. But in any case, it has been self-interacting for all eternity, probably, but in this universe, probably for 13.7 billion years, and giving rise to more and more complex forms. And the nature of that increased complexity is that it is more capable of being a embodiment or reflector of that divine intelligence, which it essentially is. So spirituality is the pursuit, we could say, or the project of accelerating, if we're on a spiritual path, of accelerating this evolutionary process consciously, willfully, intentionally, so as to, increase the pace or the pace of the development of our ability to be a reflector like that, an expressor, a conduit for that divine intelligence. And it reaches a point at which we realize, well, we are that essentially. It's not something external to us. We are that. That's our true identity. But there's some value added, you could say, from pure intelligence, pure consciousness, pure divinity, all by itself, to having a living, breathing, talking, thinking expression of it. Such a person is a blessing to the world because they can be a conduit or a channel through which the influence of that divine intelligence can pour into the world and accelerate the spiritual development of others. And I think that's very critical in this day and age, because the world is in a very tenuous position, or maybe not the world, but humanity. We've created a bit of a mess, and I think that we're heading for possible catastrophic societal collapse. But the key to minimizing the trauma of that and maximizing the potential for a positive outcome in the long run is that as many people as possible get on the train and participate in the global awakening that's taking place.
Wow. That was so well explained, and it makes me feel really good about the work that I'm attempting to do in my own life. It makes me
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing something really important.
And as I recall from our interview, you were zapped when you were like 7 years old or something. And, you know, it was almost like a Close Encounters of the Third Kind kind of thing. Where,
Yes.
you know, this beam came down and zapped you and, you know, gave you a life purpose in a way, which you've been fulfilling beautifully.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what do you think, and I totally agree with your explanation. What do you think prevents a person from getting onto that spiritual path and opening up to something higher than maybe I would define it as the conditioned self or the small self or
Yeah. Well, is like purity and light and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Rajas is sort of fire, activity, you know, the sort of excitement that you know drives us, and then tamas is dullness, inertia, ignorance. It has a very shrouding or occluding or hiding quality to it. So it's said in that tradition that all these three qualities are functional in the universe itself, in every phenomenon, in every person. We all have them in different proportions, and we need to have all three. You can't just have all one and not the other. It's sort of necessary to have all three to function in the world.
Rick, you
But I
were
think
breaking up at the beginning of that. So what are the three things that you named?
oh yeah, this is a weak spot in the trail right here. I tend to break up. I think it won't happen again. So the three things I mentioned are they're called gunas, Gunas, in the Hindu tradition, and they're considered to be three qualities or tendencies that are inherent in everything. And one is sattva, Sattva, which is like purity, light, you know, positivity kind of stuff. Another is rajas, Rajas, which is sort of energy, fire, excitement, drive, and there's a lot of other qualities to each of these. And the third is tamas, Tamas, which is dullness, inertia, stagnation. It has kind of an occluding, hiding, shrouding quality. So if a person, and all three of these things are necessary according to this way of explaining it, in the functioning of creation and in the functioning and makeup of a human being, or a cow or whatever. And so and their foods have different qualities, like some foods are sattvic, some are rajasic, some are tamasic, all kinds of things. So if a person has a heavy proportion of tamas or dullness, it can, you know, make them oblivious to the fact that there are higher dimensions or, you know, greater possibilities in life, and that, and they just don't have the aspiration to go for that kind of thing. And if someone tells them about it, they probably won't understand it or believe it. If a person has more of a rajasic quality, they might be a very dynamic person, this and that, but they still might not be. Well, I have to stop myself here because I feel this is a little simplistic. There's so many factors, but so this is one of them. You know, you can, you know, what is it? Various writers and thinkers have talked about how everyone is asleep, you know, and sleepwalking through life. So what was your original question? What is it that gets people onto spirituality or
Well,
something?
what maybe prevents someone from opening up to a spiritual path rather than kind of sleepwalking through life? And part of that I hesitate because it almost sounds judgmental.
Right.
And it almost sounds like spiritual people or are somehow in some higher,
Yeah,
more superior place. And I hesitate to do that because I don't feel
me
that
too.
at all.
That's why I stopped myself. I just
Yeah,
felt like, oh, this is sounding too preachy. But like, let's put it this way: everyone's on a spiritual path.
that's true.
Everything in the universe is on a spiritual path. My
That's
dog is
true.
on a spiritual
That's
path.
true. Yeah.
You know, um, but for it to become a conscious spiritual path where you're actually doing something that accelerates your growth, that's a fairly significant step in the evolution of a soul. And what prevents it, maybe it's a matter of timing. Maybe it's not time for that to happen. Maybe the person
Mhm.
has other functions to fulfill and experiences to have. I mean, you and I, spiritual path until a certain age. And, if I could talk to my 8-year-old self, I might say, hey, do this, don't do this, don't watch out for the next 10 years. They're going to be pretty heavy. And, but life doesn't work that way. So, when I was 18, it finally dawned on me that I should meditate and, pursue spirituality more consciously and intentionally. And I did. But I kind of feel like here's another little tangent. Feel free to interrupt me because I can get going. But with regard to free will, the way I look at it is, whatever has happened had to happen because it did. And we all make the best choices we are capable of, and what happens happens. But now in the present, we have some latitude, we have some choice, and that could have an effect on what happens in the future. There's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita which says, you have control over action alone, never over its fruits. So, we can do whatever we want, right? We can't do anything about what we did when we were 18, but we can do stuff right now that might make a difference 5 years from now. But we do the best we can, and then we see what turns out. And the actual fruits of our action are actually not in our control when they come to us. But the possibility of them being better is in our control now if we make the right choices.
Well, yeah, and I think there is something we can do from things we did in the past, maybe because we simply weren't aware or whatever. And one of those things that would be beneficial in the present day would be to forgive ourselves and to forgive others. And I know forgiveness is another big topic and something that can be maybe misunderstood in some ways, but when we forgive ourselves and forgive others, then that heaviness from the past isn't carried forward. So
I think that's really important. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I sometimes think of things I did when I was 18 or whatever, and I cringe, oh my God, how could I have done that? But I think, well, I was a stupid kid and I didn't know what I was doing. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And hopefully by being more self-scrutinizing, I won't make mistakes like that now. And my father was an alcoholic. Family life was tough. My mother ended up in mental hospitals as a result, and tried to commit suicide 3 times. And it's easy for me to start grumbling about my father, but then he had a tough road to hoe. He was in World War II and very much traumatized by that. He was a professional artist and not meant to be sitting in the tail of a bomber shooting planes out of the sky with a machine gun. It wasn't his nature to do that kind of thing. So, he came home from the war really messed up, and he did the best he could. What more? Everyone does the best they can.
But, given the your history, your family history, without you moving towards meditation, which kind of opened up different ways of looking at life, it's very easy, and a lot of people do it, just repeat the patterns that they grew up with. It's just, a repeat of that.
Sure, a lot of children of alcoholic parents become alcoholics and so on. But my experience was that, when I was 17, summer of 67, I was driving down the post road in Westport, Connecticut with 3 friends in the car. And one of them in the back seat was reading Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary's translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And they were talking about enlightenment. And I thought, yeah, enlightenment, that's what we're supposed to do. That's it. And so for the next year, I took drugs and read books about enlightenment. And by the end of that year, I had dropped out of high school, got arrested a couple of times, hitchhiked to California, done all kinds of crazy things. And one night I'd started to get into hard drugs, heroin a couple of times. One night I was sitting on some hallucinogen in the basement of my father's home, reading a Zen book because I couldn't sleep. And it just hit me. I thought, wow, these guys were really serious. And I'm just screwing around. And if I keep screwing around like this, not only am I not going to get enlightened, but I'm going to live a very short, miserable life. In fact, it's not going so well right now. So I thought, that's it. I'm going to stop taking drugs. I'm going to learn to meditate, and we'll see what happens. So I did, and I experienced huge changes from day one, and accumulating thereafter.
Yes, yes. But what do you think, when you were driving in the car and you had that moment, it's like, aha, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Moving towards enlightenment. There was something because not everybody would have that aha. So it was like some spark went off in you. Do you know what I'm saying? Not everybody would have that moment of aha.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe I was a yogi in past lives, or whatever. Maybe I was some kind of spiritual aspirant in previous lives, and the seed was planted for me to respond that way when I heard that word and heard some description of it.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to say, but I believe in that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So, this came up in an interview I did with Bob Harwood. I interviewed him shortly after you. I just thought he was so delightful.
Yeah, he's a joy.
Yeah. But something came up in that interview, and I was talking about, there's so much suffering on the planet, and that somebody who doesn't have enough food to eat or fresh water to drink could come across a conversation about spirituality or non-duality and think, what the heck are these people talking about? And I just was wondering out loud, kind of, and I mentioned, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we don't always have to go, one thing at a time, starting at survival. I know we can wake up and move in a different direction at any time, but when a person is at that survival level, the unlikelihood is a lot less. What would you say about that?
I think you're probably right. Oh, sorry. Tell me when I'm good. I'll just keep talking until you can hear me.
Okay, I can hear you better now, but I missed such a big portion of
it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there's another spot here where I have a weak signal. So what was the last thing you heard? We were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes, and I just wanted your thoughts and feelings on the possibility of somebody being at the survival level, waking up and taking a different direction, or even knowing how to get out of survival.
Right, and and so there are exceptions to every generality, but people who are at that level of desperation are not usually in a, like let's say the people who are trekking up through Mexico to the U.S. border, or the people in Somalia or the Horn of Africa who are going through such terrible deprivation. They're not likely to be thinking about this stuff or exposed to it. And they really do need food and shelter and basic necessities. And just climbed another hill. So, that's just the point. And so I think that I was just listening to a podcast called Decoding the Gurus, and they were talking to the conspirituality guys, Eric Barris, Matthew Remski, and get the other guy's name. Anyway, they were saying that, in their opinion, yoga won't really live up to its promise until every yoga studio is also a soup kitchen. And I don't know if that has to literally be the case, but in other words, and there's so many beautiful quotes we could find about this, but if, like, think of Jesus's whole sermon. Was it the Sermon on the Mount? I forget which, but he was saying, if you can do this and that and the other thing, but you have not love, then blah, you're a chump. He outlines all these things about these marvelous things you might have attained, but if you don't have love and compassion, then you're missing something. So I really think that not only the so-called spiritual people, but the whole world needs to realize, and no man is an island, to quote John Donne, and whatsoever you do unto the least of these, you do unto me, to quote Jesus. So we somehow, the top 10 people, wealth-wise, in the world possess more wealth than the bottom 40 or 50% of the entire world's population. So I think that there needs to be we can blame economic systems and political systems and all of that, but I think perhaps underlying those systems is a lack of heart, a lack of compassion. As you may have noticed, I tend to be a little long-winded once you get me going. I have to keep an eye on that when I'm interviewing people. And then when I actually have a chance to talk, it's like the dam breaks. So I'll try to keep my answers shorter so that you can get through all your questions. I probably already said everything that needed to be said about that last one.
Yeah. And I also hesitate to kind of put spirituality in a box somehow, in the sense that, what we were just talking about, people at a place of survival. I've met people that are suffering and in poverty who are the kindest, loving, compassionate people I've known. And so, it depends on, the identity or the definition of spirituality, because to me, they were very spiritual.
Good point. And I've heard people actually say, well, I'm wealthy, so I must have good karma. And those poor people, they must have bad karma. So too bad for them. What an unspiritual attitude, It could be those poor people are way more spiritual, if we can, use the word so generally, than these people who are puffed up with their wealth.
Yes. So I'm going to switch to the ego. And for a long time, it seemed real big, at least in the spiritual arenas I was in, that the ego is something bad and something to get rid of. What is your perception and understanding of the ego and how it relates to the spiritual path?
My understanding, and like all things, this is just my understanding, which is subject to revision, because I'm not egotistical, of course. But my understanding is that the ego is a faculty, like the mind is a faculty, or sight is a faculty, or the intellect is a faculty, and you need to have some sense of personal self, in order to function. I mean, if you didn't, you would be walking in front of buses. You wouldn't know which hole to stick your fork in. And but I think that when we speak of egotism, it's the condition in which that particular faculty has usurped its authority, has taken over the reins, and it's trying to do something it's not well suited to do. There's a saying in the Vedas that Brahman is the charioteer, meaning cosmic intelligence is really running the show, and the ego gets to ride in the car or in the chariot, as the case may be, but it shouldn't try to be in the driver's seat. It should relinquish that role to some wiser, higher intelligence, if at all possible.
So do you think a person still has an ego if they do reach a place of liberation?
Personally, I do. It's a matter of which is predominant. Is your sense of personal self all that you're aware of? So you think, I am this body, I am this person. When this body dies, that's the end of my existence. Everything is a threat to me because my personal body and self and life is so vulnerable to everything else. Or is your experience that I am unbounded, I am Brahman, I am this ground state of all being, and this individuality through which that functions is a wave on the ocean. I am the ocean, but I'm also the wave. And just knowing that I'm the ocean doesn't mean I cease being the wave. So the wave is the ego part, and it could be the ocean part if one is open to that, but it still plays a part.
Mm.
You get all that? What's going on here?
Yeah, that makes.
Can you hear me, Irma?
That makes sense. I missed a big part of all those words of wisdom about the ego. Oh. I heard the last maybe 5 sentences. Unfortunately.
Sorry about that. Usually I don't have this problem. I don't know. I updated to a new operating system the other day. Maybe that's the problem. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you maybe ask me a follow-up question if you want, and probably the 5 sentences were enough because as usual I ran on.
I know for myself why meditation has been an important part of kind of staying aligned in those 3 things that you initially mentioned. How could you explain to others the importance of meditation and what it's actually doing maybe in the brain and the body?
Sure. Well, there are different kinds of meditation, and but so I'll just speak in terms of my own experience, I guess, and maybe refer to some research. But in general, meditation is understood to be a practice in which the mind can settle down. What's the last thing you heard me say?
I missed most of that, unfortunately.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. I missed most.
Okay, I'll start again. We might have to do this interview over again. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. We might have to do this over again where I'm sitting in a good signal spot and just sit there.
Yes, I would love
if you want. But
yes.
Anyway, yeah. So should we give up and do that another day, or do you want to try to patch this together?
I will patch it together, but I would always be open to doing an interview with you anytime.
Okay. So you asked me about the purpose or value of meditation.
Yeah.
And I was using an analogy. Okay. So did you hear the quote from the Yoga Sutras?
No.
Okay. So there's a verse in the Yoga Sutras which says, yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. And by yoga, it means, it could mean meditation, or it could mean the yoga, meaning the state of union you arrive at when the mind has ceased to fluctuate. So why would that be the case? Why would you want to cease the fluctuations of your mind? Well, if you, let's say that we compare the pure consciousness to the sun analogously. So if the sun is shining on a pond or a lake and it's windy, then the water is very agitated from the wind and the sun doesn't reflect very clearly. But if the wind has stopped and the water is, glassy and calm, then the sun reflects brilliantly off the water. It can like be blinding to just look at the water. So like that, if our mind is agitated, then pure consciousness, our innermost nature, is generally not very clearly known. It doesn't shine through very, very, very well, so to speak. So when a person meditates, the mind settles down, hopefully. What kind of practice doing? The mind settles down, can become very still, and can reach a state at which there are no mental fluctuations at all. It has just become quiescent, and consciousness actually just shines in its own nature, which is actually the next verse in the Yoga Sutras. And so if you do that regularly, then you asked about the body, then into the nature of the mind, into our personality, into our bonding activity in the brain. The major states distinct from each other physiologically as well as subjectively in our experience. So meditation is proposed by some to be a fourth major state of consciousness. In fact, it's called Turiya in Sanskrit, which means fourth. And waking, dreaming, sleeping being the first three. Oh, there's a deer right here. You see it?
I did see. I saw it. Yes.
Yeah. So this fourth major state of consciousness, if experienced regularly, transforms the mind-body system, transforms the neurophysiology. I mean, imagine if you never slept. It would have a devastating effect on the functioning of your brain and body and nervous system. Well, imagine if there is actually a fourth major state of consciousness that we're all capable of experiencing, but we never experience it. And then we imagine you begin experiencing it and experience it regularly. That can have a very profound influence on your mind-body system. And in fact, they have done a lot of research on various forms of meditation, which find that people who've been doing it a long time do function quite differently neurophysiologically. They have a thicker prefrontal cortex. They tend to have coherent brain function in the sense that brain waves from different parts of the brain are in phase harmony with each other. The brain waves kind of sync up as opposed to being all over the place and different. And here, for some reason, I can hear you, but you can't hear me at a lot of spots. So
Yeah.
You're saying talking about.
Turiya and the fourth state of consciousness. And I think that I've experienced Turiya, and it's not like that is something separate from the other three states of consciousness. And I'm wondering, and it does make a huge difference in how one experiences life. And I'm wondering if partly that fourth state of consciousness, if there's a process of integration that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually what you're hinting at now, because initially for most people, Turiya or the fourth state, but over time it gets integrated so that it begins to underlie the other three states of consciousness.
Yes.
So it's there whether you're sleeping, dreaming, or waking.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you also mentioned the brain waves, and we're probably in beta, maybe brain waves right now, and then there's theta and delta, and then there's also brain wave called gamma. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if that gamma brain wave is somehow connected to the experience of the fourth state of consciousness. I don't know the
Uh,
answer to that.
yeah, neither do I. I'm not
Oh,
qualified to comment on that.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't follow that stuff too closely.
Yeah. So let's see. Another question is, what is the relationship from your understanding between science and spirituality?
Good question. I gave a whole talk on that at the Science and Non-Duality Conference in, I think, 2015. I'll send you a link to it. But
Yeah.
I think it has an important relationship because obviously neither one of them is going away. Science is the predominant paradigm these days and the predominant influence on our world and our technologies and everything else. And spirituality has been around for a long time and it's not going away. So how can they complement one another? What I said in that talk is that I think science can benefit spirituality by bringing an empirical, systematic attitude toward it, so that people aren't carried away by fantasies and imaginations, but they they insist upon direct experience in their own life,
Mm.
if they're on a spiritual path, and they're not satisfied with just believing things, and leaving it at that, or maybe I'll confirm it after I die, that kind of thing.
Mm.
They want direct experience,
Mm.
and they want it, and it should be able to make sense and be corroborated so that we know it's real.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, spirituality, and there's more to say about that, but on the other hand, spirituality can benefit science by opening it up to a whole realm of realities and possibilities that most scientists haven't even dreamt of, or if they've heard of them, they've denied that the possibility that they could be real. And so
So
anyway,
yes,
so you were talking about brainwaves and science and spirituality.
yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. So these days, the predominant paradigm in science is that the brain creates consciousness, that the material world is kind of the source of consciousness, the brain, and that when the brain dies, that's the end. All this stuff about life after death and any talk of consciousness being a universal fundamental field, which exists outside the confines of our body, is considered to be esoteric mumbo jumbo. But there are a number of scientists who feel that that's upside down. I interviewed a guy named Mark Gober, whom you might like to interview, who wrote a book called The End to Upside Down Thinking. And he goes through this very point in minute detail about all the ways in which science has it backwards, and how beneficial it would be if it got flipped around and we understood that consciousness is fundamental and everything else arises from consciousness. I think there are a number of reasons for explaining why our world is as messed up as it is. But this is one of them, because if we don't see everything as being imbued with consciousness, and we don't really realize that we and the tree, we and the people in Africa, we and the animals are all one, then we treat things as if they were mere objects. And we have devastated the environment, and we inflicted great harm on indigenous cultures and animal species and rainforests and all these other things. So that kind of behavior all sort of springs, I think, from a fundamental misunderstanding of how the universe is structured. But it's not just an intellectual thing, because that misunderstanding reflects the limited experience of the people who see it that way. And so both the understanding and the experience need to be revised, and you can't really revise one without changing the other.
That's a big opening there, because the statement "all is one," which I totally get and understand, how is that explained, that we are all one, or everything is one?
Mm-hmm.
That some people experience suffering and poverty, and some people don't. I guess, my mind always goes towards maybe the underdog in a sense, because we are all one. And I don't know, how you can be a conscious, awake human being and not have compassion for all human beings. So I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Oh, totally. I think that the more conscious and awake you become, the more spontaneously compassionate you become. It's inevitable. You just become more sensitive. I mean, you can't step on a bug. It kind of gives you the willies if you do something like that.
Yeah.
You feel it.
So based on that, and given that there is so much suffering on this planet, there's a saying I always keep in the back of my mind: don't become so spiritually high that you're of no earthly good. So given somebody who's kind of dedicated and committed to the spiritual path, what do you think and feel is the best approach to do the most that a person can do to?
Well, you've probably heard the term spiritual bypassing.
Yes.
And, some people use spirituality as a way of becoming oblivious to the world, or hiding out from their problems, or something like that. And I think that in the true sense of the word, spirituality should make us more tuned into the world and more compassionate for suffering people and so on. The term enlightenment is bandied about, and I'm very hesitant to use it because it has too much of a static, superlative connotation. But if I were to use it, I would want to reserve it for people who had not only sort of realized pure consciousness, but who had blossomed fully in all the other channels or aspects of their personality. The heart, the intellect, the perceptual abilities, all those things. They're a fully developed, well-rounded human being whose life is grounded in pure awareness or God. That kind of person would deserve the term enlightenment. But it's very often used much more loosely than that. So anyway, I mean, spirituality has practical value for the world, because I think the more spiritual people were, the fewer problems we'd have in the world, because there'd be more compassion, more generosity, more intelligence, less selfishness, all those things.
So how does a person on the spiritual path, using disciplines such as meditation, yoga, whatever disciplines they're using, how do they stay aligned themselves, kind of stay tuned in themselves, while also being aware of all the suffering and everything that's kind of happening on the planet now, without that becoming overwhelming in the sense that it knocks you out of your own alignment? I don't know if I worded that well, but
I know what you mean. Yeah. I don't know. It's like, I guess you have to moderate your dosages. I'm kind of a news junkie myself. When 9/11 happened, I certainly felt compassion for what people were experiencing, but I just thought, wow, this is suggestive of big changes to come. That this is happening. I listen to the news every day, and I in a way, it makes me more fervent in my own desire to evolve spiritually and do what I can to promote spiritual development in others. I don't want to just hang out in the cave and say, the world be damned. I feel like I'm ever since I've been about 20 years old and became a meditation teacher, I felt like, well, the most leverage I can have, the most influence I can have will be in the field of consciousness. If I can do something to enliven my own consciousness and help others do so, that'll enable me to have the greatest possible beneficial impact. And so that's been my focus all these years, and Bat Gap has just been a nice channel for expressing that.
Yeah, that makes sense, because we're all kind of called towards maybe something that resonates within our own being, and however we apply the gifts and abilities that we have, and that's all different. Yours happens to be in the field of spirituality and interviewing, and that's, one part that we know of Rick Archer. I'm sure there's many parts of.
Well, I used to be a drummer in rock bands when I was a teenager, and that was a lot of fun. And but I left my band to become a meditation teacher, and it was a bit of a pinch. I didn't really want to leave. I wanted them to come on the course too, and maybe we could all, become meditation teachers and still have a band. But they didn't want to do it, so I thought, oh well, I got to go. There's a saying in India: if no one comes on your call, then go ahead alone. But I'm not belittling any other thing a person does. I mean, I like listening to music, and I admire the musicians, and I'm using a phone right now that somebody invented, and so on and so forth. And I have a car and all that. So everybody has to do all these things. We all have our specialties, but spirituality can actually be part of anybody's life, no matter what else they're doing.
So when you had that that's what we're, supposed to be doing here, moving towards enlightenment. And how you say everything on this planet is on a spiritual path.
Mm-hmm. And every planet, all planets.
On all planets.
Whole universe.
The whole universe, right. Yeah. And that brings up something else, because it has always seemed to me the fact that, and now I'm going to probably get into something that maybe is a touchy subject, but, planet Earth and the religions that were created on planet Earth kind of made it seem like we are the center of the universe. And I think religion played a really big part in that. And sometimes I wonder if it helped or didn't help.
Oh, there was a guy named Bruno something or other in Italy and hundreds of years ago that was burned at the stake for suggesting that the stars might be other suns like our own, and they might have planets around them, and there might be people on those planets. The church hated that because it sort of threatened their centrality opinion. And if I ever encounter religious fundamentalists, which I don't very often these days, I try to start talking astronomy with them and give them a sense of how many trillions of inhabited planets there probably are in the universe, and how probably on most of those planets there are many religions, each of which thinks it's the only one, or the only true one. And it's just sort of silly, but it's a symptom of human mentality, I think. The desire to think my thing is the best thing and everybody else is inferior to me, and so on. That's where this fundamentalism comes from.
And so, yes. And so based on, religion and the belief in, say, just Christianity and the belief in a God, I wonder sometimes if that belief somehow makes human beings feel less responsible for what they do and how they do it?
I think sometimes it does. I think people use various beliefs to justify all kinds of things. The guys who flew planes into the World Trade Centers did so on the basis of certain beliefs.
Beliefs, yes.
Yeah. My attitude toward beliefs is that I take them as hypotheses. In other words, I'm open to the possible. I take that, like, people can tell me anything, and I give them the benefit of the doubt, but I also take it with a grain of salt, and proportions vary. So if somebody tells me the Earth is flat, that's all salt. I mean, there's no there's no benefit of the doubt in that for me. But if somebody says angels exist, that for me is like, mostly there's very little salt in that. I think they do. But I wouldn't like stake my life or anybody else's life on any belief, because I don't think it's all. So Oprah Winfrey once asked Eckhart Tolle. She was doing this thing where he was supposed to finish her sentences, and so one sentence was, "I believe," and he said, "Nothing in particular."
Yes, yes. And so how much does belief interfere?
I think it interferes if you're rigid about it, but if you take it as if you take it as the way science works, you form a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is something you think might be true and might be worth your time and energy to investigate. And so then you investigate it, and your investigations either support or weaken your hypothesis. And let's say you end up concluding, and my hypothesis seems to be right. My research bears this out. Then you publish it, and you tell all the other scientists, okay, here's what I did. Here's how I did the research. You try it and see if it works for you. And, knock it down if you can, or support it. And so, if things get supported enough, they become pretty well established theories, which are still open to the possibility of, some contrary evidence could happen. But we trust them more and more and more as more evidence accumulates. So you asked me earlier about science and spirituality. I have a very scientific attitude about spirituality and kind of stuff we're talking about here. And I think everyone possesses the most sophisticated scientific instrument ever to exist, at least on our planet, which is the human nervous system, mind-body system. And we can all do research in consciousness, if you want to call it that, with this instrument, without having any particular level of education or other abilities.
And you're talking about direct experience.
Exactly, right.
Mm-hmm.
We can use this instrument to explore deeper levels of reality and to discover our own innermost nature.
Yes, yes. Which somehow, and I'm not sure how, maybe the talk of religion and science and spirituality, for some reason, what just came to my mind is Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And, before they were had a specific religion, I would say they definitely had a spirituality. So do you have any understanding or things to share about Native Americans before religion kind of entered the picture for them, and how they were living on this earth, and the connection to maybe present day? And
well, I'm not an expert in that, although my next guest is a woman named Jennifer Lisa Vest, whom I'll be interviewing. But I do believe that it's kind of a crime that religions, particularly Christianity, on this hemisphere, came in and subjugated and destroyed the cultural integrity of so many Native Americans. It was really, and Christianity had a lot to do with it, but not everything. There were commercial interests, but approximately 100 million people were killed as a result of Europeans coming to North and South America over several hundred years, which is the greatest genocide in the history of humanity.
Yep.
And the attitude behind all that was that these people are heathens, they're savages, and we have the superior knowledge. So let's give them smallpox or whatever and wipe them out, and they'll be better off. or let's put the children in these schools and you cut off their hair and beat them if they speak their native language, and all this horrible stuff that happened.
Yes.
I get pretty steamed up when I start talking about it. But it
There's a
obviously,
documentary called The Domination Code. Have you seen that?
no, but I've read articles and seen things about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll send you a link if you have any interest, but yes.
sure.
Yes.
I got a low battery signal, so I have about 18% battery left. So if I
Okay.
drop off all of a sudden, that'll be it for now. We'll see.
Okay.
I can talk for a little while longer till the
Okay.
battery dies.
I get very passionate about Native Americans and what happened there, and maybe the unawareness that still is around in 2023 in regards to that. So
Yeah, I was just reading an interesting thing about how the some South American culture spoke of the eagle and the condor, and the eagle was the intellect and the condor was the heart, and they were the condor people, and the Westerners who were coming in were the eagle people, and they prophesied that for 500 years the eagle people were going to become predominant, exterminate the condor people, and they would wreak great havoc on and damage on the culture and the environment and all that, but that at the end of 500 years there would be a resurgence of the condor wisdom, and that there would eventually be a rebalancing where both heart and mind could coexist and benefit one another.
wow, I love that. And boy, that's exactly what we need right now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, do you ever have doubt as
About
far
what?
as doubt in something higher than what appears to be on this earth, and doubt maybe about the spiritual path?
No, never.
Me either.
I mean, it's staring me right in the face.
Yes, you can't get away from it.
I'm looking at some leaves here. If I just, or my own experience inwardly, but if outwardly, I'm looking at some leaves. And if I think about one cell in one of those leaves,
Yes.
and if I could step inside that cell and observe the intelligence with which it's being orchestrated,
Yeah.
and then realize that intelligence is permeating everything I can see and everything beyond what I can see.
Mhm.
We're just swimming in an ocean of unfathomably infinite intelligence. I'm looking at a bumblebee now. That's a nice example. And it's just plain as the nose on my face, which is pretty plain.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So since we're losing percentage here, do you have any words of wisdom or anything that you would like to share with people that are on the spiritual path, or anyone who might come across this video in the future?
Well, I would say keep on trucking, first of all. I mean, it's don't fall into the sort of McDonald's mentality of I want to get enlightened by next weekend or such. It's a lifelong endeavor, and don't fall into the neo-Advaita trap of people telling you you're already enlightened and all you have to do is realize that and you're done. It's if that's the case, then enlightenment isn't worth much, given the if everybody's supposed to be already enlightened. And just find an effective practice. Stay on a good routine, eat healthy food, get plenty of exercise, take care of all aspects of your life, your relationships, be good in your relationships. We haven't talked much about ethics. I helped to establish an organization called the Association for Spiritual Integrity, which I'm very active in. We spoke at Harvard Divinity School last April and the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago this summer.
Oh.
And I didn't come in person, but we spoke. And I think that ethics are very important on the spiritual path and are neglected or ignored too much in many spiritual groups, which is why we see so many difficult situations with gurus misbehaving and students being duped out of their money or their bodies, or or whatever by unethical teachers. So I think that it's good to have. There's a quote from Padmasambhava that I've said a million times, who's a Buddhist sage. He said, "Although my awareness is as vast as the sky, my attention to karma is as fine as a grain of barley flour." And what he meant by that, karma means action. So what he was saying is that, hey, I'm in a pretty good state of consciousness here, but I have to be very careful. Moment to moment, I act with impeccability, which is a word Carlos Castaneda's teacher used a lot, impeccability. And because if you don't, then there are so many examples of people, falling off the razor's edge, so to speak, getting waylaid on the spiritual path, causing harm to themselves and others. So I just think that an appreciation for ethics and an actual attention to it should be important on an important part of everyone's spiritual toolkit. In fact, that lady that I'm going to interview next too is well versed in various Native American and other ethnic spiritual paths. Wrote a book called The Ethical Psychic, which I just finished reading. She makes a lot of great points. But that's just something I wanted to dwell on for a minute.
No, that's really important. And, part of, what I'm trying to fine tune and create focus for myself is to help people that are on the spiritual path kind of find their way and point them towards people that are ethical on the spiritual path. So what would be, I know that's something that you're doing in all of your interviews. I mean, because no one is going to be on Bat Gap or kept on Bat Gap that isn't carrying those ethics. I would imagine.
That's right.
I would hope.
Oh yeah, we check people out as best we can, and then I've had to take down about 25 interviews out of the nearly 700 I've done for various things. I mean, some of them are more egregious than others, but as far as being able to find a teacher that is ethical and it's just like, keep your eyes open. If you have doubts, don't just dismiss them. I mean, there's so many cases where people will sit there and the teacher will be going more and more off the rails, and the person will be thinking, well, this seems weird, but he's supposed to be enlightened and I'm not, and therefore I'm just going to keep sitting here. And then the whole thing just the rails, students included. So you just have to kind of like be sensitive to it. You might want to check out the Association for Spiritual Integrity. We have about 550 members and about 25 member organizations, and we're going to try to do more to cater to students as well as people who define themselves as spiritual teachers of some sort. So far, we haven't had the bandwidth to do too much with students, but we want to bring that in.
Yeah, and also I would imagine a big part on the spiritual path is to understand the direct experience piece, that you yourself can be a teacher.
Oh yeah,
yes.
And if not a teacher,
well,
then because it's not everybody's role to be a teacher. Although maybe what you're saying is you can be your own teacher in a sense.
Yes, like learn from turning inwards and
ultimately I think even if we have an external teacher, ultimately it's all about turning within and becoming self-sufficient. And any external teacher who's worth his salt won't want to keep you dependent upon him or her. They'll want you to sort of be able to stand on your own 2 feet. And which is not to say everybody has the dharma to become an actual spiritual teacher. You might be a physicist or a violinist or something, but I guess that makes the point. I'm probably down to about 5% now. So
all right.
if we cut off, then that's why.
Yes. Well, I think that, I mean, other than the moments that I couldn't get your words of wisdom, I think I can piece this together, and I so appreciate you taking time to do this, Rick.
Yeah. Zoom really drains the phone batteries more than other things, but
yes.
But anyway, we'll do another one sometime.
I would love that.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of questions you have that we didn't get to.
Yes, yes. And I had many people, I said there might be a chance that I'm going to interview Rick Archer. So many people kind of, sent forward questions. So
Oh,
anytime,
good.
call
All
on
right.
me anytime.
And next time I'll just sit in a good Wi-Fi spot or spot and not bop around the
Wonderful.
park so much.
Well, the best to you and also to Irene.
All right. Thanks, Irma.
Thank you, Rick.
Talk to you later.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.